Thank you. I actually do not have an original for you today. I have a story that comes to us from China. There is a city in China called Luoyang, and Luoyang comes by its name very honestly. It lies on the Luo River. So the river runs from west to east, and it's really thick right here, and then it goes down to a skinny spot. And the city, Luoyang, lays on the north side of the Luo River. The north side, or the sunny side, or the yang, Luoyang, yes? So good, right? I love language. Okay, brilliant. So that's where we are. And because Luoyang lies on that big, thick part of the river, people have to cross this wide river in order to get to the city gates. Now, this is a very important city. It's a major capital in China. It was actually an important capital through many dynasties in China for hundreds of years. And so people would come from all four corners and all five directions to Luoyang. And if they wanted to get to the city gates, they had to climb into a boat and take a long boat ride all the way across that thick part of the river to get to the city. So they packed up these beautiful lacquer lunch boxes, and they would pile into these boats with each other. And it was a long crossing, so they would settle in, and they opened those lunch baskets, and they took out pork buns and ginger chicken and sweet tea. And they got to know each other, and they told each other stories, and they sang songs, and they laughed. And it was generally just a good time had by everybody. But one morning, deep in the river, which was green, by the way, it's a green river, which is really interesting. The people said it looks like green silk when they were riding across it on boats. So deep in the river, buried underneath a silked blanket, was the river dragon king. And he woke up that morning and he rolled back his silk blanket, and he straightened out his whiskers. And he was long, with shiny golden scales, and the finest whiskers in all of China, of course. And he woke up that morning and he heard all of those people in those boats laughing. And their laughter was so loud. And he had woken up this morning feeling extra dragony. So he took that long tail of his and he threshed it. And the water on the river began to wave from side to side. And he threshed it stronger and bigger, his tail. And those waves started to get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger until they started to slosh up over onto the riverbanks. And all of the people in those boats overhead, they started to capsize those boats. And they tossed over people into the river, grandfathers and grandmothers and fathers and mothers and sons and daughters and dogs and cats and picnic boxes, chaos. It was like, woof, meow, splash. And the dragon heard all of these sounds, and he said, oh, listen to that little boy struggling like a wet rat. Oh, and look at that grandmother, so stately, but here she is bobbing on the surface like a watermelon. And this little dog, well, he can swim, good for him, but the river has carried away his bone. Oh! And the dragon laughed his way through that whole day. And the next day he woke up, and he rolled back his silk blanket, and he straightened out his whiskers, and he thrashed his long golden tail, and the river water began to wave from side to side. And he thrashed his tail bigger and stronger, and those waves got bigger and bigger and bigger until they started to slosh over onto the riverbanks, and all of those boats started to capsize. Splash, meow, woof, right? And the dragon said, oh, it's music to my ears. How delightful. But there was one little girl who had been dunked into the river, and she crawled her way up onto the riverbank. She was, her clothes were all sopping wet, her hair was dripping, and she started to cry. Her pork bun had sunk to the bottom of the river, and she had nothing else to eat. And her little cat crawled up onto the bank next to her, and its fur was all sticking to its body, and you could kind of see its rib cage. And the little cat said, meow. And high above, in a heavenly palace, the goddess Guanyin was there. Now, Guanyin has many names, as many goddesses and gods do. She's the goddess of compassion. She is a goddess of mercy. And, my favorite, she's the goddess who hears all the sounds of the world. So Guan Yin, she heard that little girl crying, and she heard that little cat meowing, and she decided that she needed to go down to Luo Yang to fix things. So she descended from her heavenly palace, yes, and she landed on the riverbank, and the waves were still splashing around, and they came up just to the tips of her beautiful silk slippers. She was wearing a long white robe that had a sheen to it, just like silk, because it was made of silk. And it was embroidered with willow branches and lotus flowers and fish all down the bottom. And she stood on the riverbank and she said, oh, sorry, I forgot her hair, very important, her hair, shiny and sleek. And her throat was covered with tokens and emblems because she piled necklaces around her neck that had been gifts to her from other gods and humans. And she stood on that riverbank and she said, Dragon King, we need to talk. Now the Dragon King was sleeping down below the river. He was having this really great dream about a banquet of crabs and shrimp. But he heard her voice and woke up immediately, and he straightened out his whiskers and he swam up to the surface and popped up so that just the top of his head and his eyeballs were over the surface. And he saw this radiant person standing on the riverbank, and all he could say was, and the bubbles, right? Bubbles. Because he couldn't speak, she was so radiant. And she said, Honorable Dragon King, I have come to talk to you about this wave nonsense. I know it is very fun to watch those waves, but did you know that you are making many, many people miserable? And the dragon, he popped up out of the water with waves. His whiskers shook as he laughed. I know! That's what makes me laugh so hard. And the Guan Yin, she said, but so many people are suffering just to make you laugh. And the dragon said, I don't care, I'm having fun. And he lifted his long tail up out of the water. Water sort of splashing off her, and he lifted up over their head, water's raining down, and he slaps his tail down as hard as he can on the surface of the river. So whack! And the river waters go, waves as big as mountains shoot up. And he, so delightful! And his laughter followed Guan Yin as she traveled her way and floated back up to her heavenly palace. Now she got up there and she said, I have got to do something about this dragon. Untenable situation. And she thought a little bit, like, that's not gonna work. But what about, no, that's not it. Can I, no. But finally, she had it. She took off that long, beautiful silk robe and she exchanged it for a hanfu, which is like everyday wear, sort of. So big, loose trousers that tighten in around the ankles, and a long tunic that closes in the front, and then a short jacket over all of that. She tied it with a rope. And at dawn, she picked up a woven fishing basket that was full of fresh fish. And she descended back down to Luo Yang and walked right into the marketplace, where she laid down a cloth on the ground. And she set that fishing basket right in the center of the cloth. And she waited. Now, there were people all over the marketplace, and they saw her fish, and her fish was so fresh that the eyes were still moving. And I know, to us it's gross, right? But everyone was like, oh, those are really fresh fish, this is great. And they used that as an excuse to come and to stand as close as they could to the most beautiful fishmonger they had ever seen. Her clothing was more rough now, yes, but her hair was still shiny, and her cheeks had a perfect pink blush, and she radiated grace. So people crowded around, and of course, she sold all of her fish within a couple minutes, but all these people still stood around. So she said, Dear friends, I have sold all my fish, so let's play a game. And people went, oh, a game, right? Everyone loves a game. And she said, whoever throws the most money into my basket, I will marry them. And everyone in the crowd, was very excited. And it's a big deal, right? She lives in a palace in heaven, right? And so if she has to marry someone down here, she's gonna have to come down here and live on Earth with us, at least for like one human lifetime. That's kind of a big deal, right? It's a big commitment. And like the goddess of compassion and mercy, she's not about to break a promise, right? So we know that she's in it for good. She said, whoever puts the most money in my basket, I'll marry them. But anything that lands on my cloth, we will use to build a bridge so that you all can cross safely over the top of the river dragon. And the people got the most excited. This is the most exciting. Oh my gosh, this is a great idea, right? But one young man in the crowd, he said, how's she gonna know? How's she gonna know who put the most money in there, eh? And another, he's an old man, and his clothes had patches, and he said, yeah, I'm so poor, there's no way I can win. And a woman who had the biggest purse of all, she said, that basket's so big, it's like not even hard. And nobody, like everyone can get their money in there, no one's gonna miss. But they all fumbled for their purses to see who could be the quickest to throw a coin in. The young man was first, pulled out a single silver coin, and he got himself ready. Honestly, it looked like he knew what he was doing, which was kind of weird. But he got himself ready, he got himself in a position, and he tossed his single golden coin. And it sailed through the air, and it flipped itself end over end, and it was right on target. And then right at the very end, a strong breeze, and that coin landed close to the basket, but not inside the basket. Now the second man took his last 2 pieces of copper out, and he rubbed them together for good luck. This is my last chance, right? And he held them sandwiched together. And he took those 2 copper coins and he tossed them together. And they flew through the air together, right on target, but they started to shake against each other just a little bit. And right at the very end, they ricocheted against each other and close to the basket, but not inside the basket. Now last we have the woman with the huge purse, and she reached deep in that purse, and she pulled out a whole fistful of gold coins. Now we know gold is really heavy, right? So they clunk. Gold coins don't clink, they clunk, right? So we hear clunk, clunk, clunk in her fist. She goes, that basket is so big, and I have so much money. I'm definitely gonna win. She gets ready, she doesn't even try very hard. She just sort of like tosses that whole handful of coins. And most of them go sort of like, whoop, 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 right? Whoop, 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 whoop. But one of them looks like it's right on target, just right down the middle. But it falls a tiny bit short, and it clips the rim of the fish basket, and it starts to spiral around the edge of the fish basket. And right off of the rim and onto the cloth, close to the basket, but not inside the basket. Now Guan Yin, she sat in that marketplace all day. And at the end of the day, her cloth was covered with piles of copper and silver and gold, but her basket was empty. Now about a year later, our river dragon king was sleeping in his comfortable silt blanket deep underneath the green Luo River. And he woke up, he stretched, and he rolled back his blanket, and he straightened his whiskers, and he thrashed his tail from side to side, and that river water started to wave from side to side, and he thrashed his tail bigger and stronger, and the waves got bigger and bigger and bigger, and they started to slosh over onto the riverbank, and the dragon listened for that beautiful sound of splashing and squealing, but the only thing he heard was the sound of his own waves, because far overhead, right across the river dragon's bed, a magnificent, sturdy bridge stood. And that dragon king could make waves as big as he wanted to. But from that day forward, he never dumped another person, or dog, or cat, not even a lunchbox.